Under Committee Rule 9, we will now question witnesses under the 5-minute rule. I will recognize myself for the first 5 minutes. Dr. Miceli, I was shocked to hear that 77% of medical school mission statements could be characterized as supporting DEI and even standardized tests like the MCAT. That is some questions with progressive buzzwords such as social justice or institutional racism. You might have covered this in your statement, but I just want to highlight it again. DEI in medicine seems to be based on the idea of racial concordance. Medical treatment from one person of the same race is automatically better for the patient. How does the research debunk this racist claim?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think it's important to understand that the highest level of research we can look at are systematic reviews, right? Those are compilations of the evidence that's out there. And when we look at this question of racial concordance, the idea that black patients do better with black doctors or white patients do better with white doctors, one of the things that we understand is that 4 out of 5 of systematic reviews that have looked at that question find that there's no difference in outcome based on racial concordance. There's no difference in the utilization of care. There's no difference in the quality. There was one study, one of those 5, that does show there's some benefit to communication. I will say I questioned some of the methodology that was done in that systematic review. It includes or excludes some studies that some of the other systematic reviews have not. But nonetheless, there are 4 out of 5 systematic reviews that show that racial concordance does not improve quality. In fact, we also know this to be true in our hearts. We know that everybody wants the best possible care. Do No Harm actually did a survey of this and found that 88% of black individuals, when surveyed, want highly competent physicians. That's what everyone wants. It makes sense. The other thing is when we look at specific studies, there's a study on racial concordance that comes from 2020. I believe it was Brad Greenwood and colleagues who had done that study. It looks at black doctors serving black patients, and this is in the case of babies being delivered and infant mortality, and it looks at white doctors caring for those black patients as well. And the original publication of that study had claimed that black doctors did better for black babies than white doctors. It turned out in 2024, actually the colleagues at the Manhattan Institute had been able to get the data from the authors and reran it, but they looked at one key element, and that's low birth weight babies. That wasn't taken into account in the 2020 publication of the study. And when you look at low birth weight babies, you find that racial concordance difference goes away completely. There is no difference whether the doctor is black or white. And I think that's something that's really so critical to remember. And one of the challenges that we've seen in our literature and in academia is the first study that I mentioned from 2020 was cited almost 800 times. And that second study that actually shows that you really need to look at low birth weight babies was only cited less than 10 times. And this is part of the challenge in academia where, unfortunately, studies that make these claims that are just not based in the evidence when you look at it, unfortunately propagate themselves throughout the halls of academia, throughout medical associations, and the like.
Thank you. I want to pass on to one real quick before we run out of time here. Ms. Mukherjee, unfortunately, we know many DEI offices just change the title on the buildings, but keep the same staff and ideology. What are some examples of strong anti-DEI reforms that can prevent this from happening?
Thank you, Congressman. I would look to several examples of DEI legislation that many states have passed, because the key is not necessarily the name of the office as listed in state legislation in areas such as Texas or Iowa or Florida, but rather the function of the office. The function matters much more than the names. The way to combat it is in legislation to say, for example, we're not just looking to eliminate diversity, equity, and inclusion offices, but any office that engages in racially discriminatory practices such as racial preferences in admissions or hiring, mandatory diversity-affiliated statements, segregated graduation ceremonies. This was also something that President Trump took great care to do that I noticed in his executive orders. So I think any future legislation from this body or wherever else in the states geared toward eliminating diversity, equity, and inclusion offices should focus on the function of these offices and less so exclusively on the name. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm now going to, let's see right here. I have a few seconds left. Mr. Mornoff, supporters of the DEI hide behind the vague positive words of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Can you talk about how these vague positive words have resulted in illegal discrimination? We just have a few seconds left, but hope you can.
Of course, I don't terribly care what label is used. What I care is whether there are activities unfolding which violate our non-discrimination laws. Are people being intentionally treated differently in violation of Title VI or Title IX? Are people being hired or promoted on the basis of their demography in violation of Title VII?
Thank you. Thank you so much. I now recognize Mr. Decano from California. Is it? Okay, I'm sorry. Ms. Macbeth from Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to say to each of you that are our guests today, thank you so much for your